Hello to all of our listeners, and welcome back to The Parent Solution, your one-stop shop for all things educational. I'm your host, Kimberly, and this is another guest episode, and I have a guest with me, Bronwyn Snell. Bronwyn runs a human design coaching business, and it's called Guided by Human Design. She often describes human design as if it was a personality test, like Myers-Briggs or like Enneagram got together with astrology and sort of had this massively informative baby, which sounds kind of odd, but human design gives us a guidebook or a blueprint as to how our energy is meant to be used in the world. And with children, she finds that often, once people discover their human design, they realize that they're really punishing themselves for living as they were meant to live. And we also do that a lot of the time with our kids. And, we may get frustrated or struggle to understand why our children behave a certain way or why they need certain things. And when deep diving into their human designs, we find that they were just born to function this way energetically. And Bronwyn believes that once you feel confident and fulfilled with who you are, we can look at significant relationships in your life, regardless of who that is, if it's significant others or children or family members. And Bronwyn deep dives in a way that helps you to operate with more compassion and empathy within that relationship. Bronwyn is also a mom to two very energetic little boys, and she's found that human design is a game changer in the way that she parents. So she's here today to talk a little bit about her experiences with human design, a little bit about who she is as a person, and to kind of share her little bit of a life story with us. Bronwyn, it is so good to have you here. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Good. I'm excited to have you here. So I've kind of introduced you a little bit. Do you want to maybe tell our listeners a little bit about where you're coming from in terms of human design and where that sort of idea stems from?
Exactly. So I actually was in education for 15 years. So I served as a teacher in a few different capacities, taught first grade, second grade, elementary music, and did some of the administration leadership route as well. And recently, I just decided that since education is kind of going in a direction that I don't feel serves kids the best way and doesn't always serve educators the best way, that I would change gears. And about a year and a half ago, I discovered human design and created my own coaching business because I feel like all of us need the permission slip to kind of tap into who we are, who we're meant to be, and heal ourselves. And then by doing that, we can reach out to these relationships that we form, whether it's friends, family members, and start to heal relationships and just operate in ways like you said in the introduction, ways that have more compassion and empathy and kind of honor who everybody is meant to be. So it's been kind of a weird journey, but I feel like I use all of my parenting skills, my teacher skills, and put them into my human design business.
Mm-hmm. That's very cool. This is definitely something that I think is a one of a kind sort of approach to how you take it and to how you operate. So I was really interested in being able to hear about that. You said that you were a teacher, and can you talk about your experience within the education system a little bit?
Absolutely. So, I started teaching straight out of college at 22 and, was very, I think like a lot of people are very optimistic and very, I don't know, very hopeful the whole change the world type of thing.
Of
And
course.
I loved teaching for so long and even got to the point where I wanted to have a greater impact on not just the students in my classroom. And that's why I started to go down the administration path. But as I went, I just was met with frustration. I realized that being in administration, it's dealing with a lot of negatives. It's very lonely. I feel like there's so many restrictions that come from the top down, even beyond administration, like looking at county level or state level or, country, wherever. Teaching just has so many restrictions and there's so many people with their hands in the pot that don't have any educational experience. And since COVID and virtual teaching and things like that, there's just been so much put on teachers from what we're meant to cover during the school day, how we're meant to be everything to the kids. I mean, kids are, especially coming out of a pandemic, they're having this trauma and these social emotional lessons that they need to learn. And we have to be, teacher, mom, counselor, nurse, all of the things to kids. And so many teachers want to be those things, but then we have this other side where it's like, this is your job. You have to be evaluated for what you're doing. Administration or whoever is going to be on top of you to make sure that you're producing results. And we're looking at tests and testing kids on this and testing kids on this and testing the kids on this. And even though there is this theoretical push towards differentiation and teaching kids as unique learners, that standardized testing, it doesn't allow us the time in the day to actually teach kids the way that we know how, or as teachers to be creative and reach kids the way that we know would be best. We're having to follow, these step-by-step instructions and can't really go outside of the box. And all of us, teachers have no differentiation the way we're being treated. So it's just been a very profound journey. And once I discovered human design, I was like, you know what? If we could incorporate this into schools, we would actually be meeting the kids where they're at and helping them find success instead of pushing them to operate in a way that makes them feel like they're hitting a dead end or bumping up against a wall or just getting frustrated or bitter or whatever it is that they're feeling because they're not finding success in this very cookie cutter way that we've created.
Mm-hmm. I know for a fact for myself too, I don't have 15 years of experience in the classroom like yourself, but I know that that when I was in the classroom and when I was working within a classroom space, I was really lucky, during my teachers college career or profession to have really, really good mentor teachers. I was very fortunate. Because I know that not all of my teachers college classmates had the same thing, but even with my mentor teachers, it got to be difficult sometimes for me to be enthusiastic, and that wasn't anything to do with the teachers themselves. That was more to do with like, oh, make sure you're following this regulation, make sure that you're doing it this way, right? They make sure that these are the expectations that you're supposed to fill, right? And I found myself, planning lessons and doing things for the classroom. And my focus would be more on the administration side of things and like the paperwork side of things, than in actually allowing myself to be creative and to be myself with the kids. And for me, I have a little bit of performance anxiety, so that definitely did not do well with me because I was sitting there being too worried about checking off all the check boxes of everything that I needed to make sure that I accomplished, than actually being able to connect with the students. And, in classrooms in either public school or Catholic school, because I was in both, in both of those environments, you're looking at classrooms of between 20 to 30, one of my classes had 32 children in it. And this was in high school. So, between 20 to 32 kids, I can't actually, like, you cannot physically or mentally or emotionally connect with all of those children in the same way. It's just not, like, as much as people say, oh, differentiate your lessons and make sure that you're connecting with kids, but you can't. There's one of you and there's 20 of them at least, right? Or 15 of them at least. So it was definitely an eye-opener for me when I was in the classroom. So I can relate to that part of your struggle for sure.
Oh yeah. And like you said, the big classroom numbers, like there aren't enough hours in the day. And like, I've seen a meme somewhere where it's like teaching is the only profession where you have to work before work and work after work so that you can actually work while you're at work, and you're not getting paid for those things either.
Yep.
And it's raining on the teachers mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, because you're putting in all of this time, effort, money into this classroom and just not being supported. And you want so deeply at your core, I would venture to guess, 99% of teachers want so badly to connect with all of those kids and want to be able to have that relationship and support the students in the ways that we know that they need it. But because of, like you said, all the administrative stuff, the paperwork, the other expectations and the meetings and the time that's taken away from us during our hours, that you just have to draw a line in the sand somewhere, especially
Mm-hmm.
as I got older and I got married and I had kids. I was like, well, I have to be able to have time with my own children. So,
Mm-hmm.
at some point I have to call it a day and just do as much as I can in the hours that I have.
Right. And not overstretch yourself. It's funny because when I was younger, one of my driving forces, when I was, 7, 8 years old, a little girl, I decided I wanted to be a teacher. My dad was a teacher, not in the typical sense. You might call him an alternative educator. So I'm following his footsteps, so to speak.
Mhm.
But I always wanted to be a teacher, because I wanted to be able to spend time with my kids should I choose to have them one day, right? And my logic as a little 7-year-old was, oh well, I'll go to work as a teacher, and I'll go to work and I'll come home and I'll grade my papers, but at least I'll be home if my kids need me, right? And then that was me at 7 and naive and didn't really know any better. And I got a little bit older and I realized, like, oh, that's not actually the case. But I love teaching, so that's why I stuck with it, right? Teaching is my passion and it's my purpose. So but I had to step outside of that sort of traditional teaching box because it just wasn't where I belonged. It wasn't where I felt that I could make the most impact and make the most difference, and really feel like I could lay down my head at night and be like satisfied with what I've done during the day, right?
Oh yeah, I totally relate to that too. Like in the past year or so, I've had to come to terms with the fact that all my life I thought I would be a teacher in the walls of a classroom, just like my mom was, just like my grandfather was. But now I'm realizing you can still be that teacher and still have that impact, but it might just look a little bit different. Like even in the coaching business,
Absolutely.
helping adults, I'm still that teacher. I'm still providing help. It's just outside of the walls of a classroom or teaching
Right.
online or doing, tutoring or whatever that is. Like there's other options. And I think now, especially teachers are starting to realize that and starting to realize they can still have that impact as a teacher and have
Mm-hmm.
it look a little bit better and fit into their lives a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of get them back to that passion that they discovered when they were little too.
Right. Exactly. And to me, like life is so short. And I know that, with human design, you talk about energies, and you talk about the way that people are designed to like learn and be. And for me, that was, I mean, I don't know that I knew about human design and all of that. But for me, I just felt something in my soul that was like, this is not the right direction for me to go in. And that was really scary because for, 22, 23 years of my life, I was thinking, okay, I want to be a public school teacher. Like I based my entire school career, right? Like I went through 6 years of post-secondary to do that, right? I went and got the papers and did all the things and like checked off all the check boxes, only to realize like this is not really what I want in the typical sense, right? I'm not happy doing this. So, I hate to use the word pivot, but I pivoted, I changed. I was like, all right, how can I take what I have and use it for something else that's still going to be in the same related field, but that's going to give me a much more positive way of relating to students, and I'm going to actually make much more of a difference. I felt, because I'm able to reach those kids, right? Quality over quantity is kind of my motto in that sense.
Yeah, I love that. And it's totally right. It's all about finding the way that your energy works. So not just the energy of our kids, but the energy of the teachers so that we can be the best. Like in human design, there's 5 different energy types, and I'm considered a projector, which
Mm-hmm.
funny enough is like the teacher, the wise guide. And I was like, well, I'm very aligned to what I'm doing. But at the same time, I'm only meant to use my energy very efficiently for like 3 to 4 hours a day. And then I get exhausted and completely drained. And once I discovered that about myself, I was like, oh, that totally makes sense. Because for so long, I was teaching at school all day, and then I would teach high school drumline, and I'd be working 12, 13, 14-hour days, as a lot of teachers actually have to do, because to make the money that they need to survive, they've got to have some second, third income.
Of
And
course.
it was just completely unaligned for me. So now I'm able to find a way where I can teach and help people within a certain amount of hours a day and use my energy more efficiently so I can be happier and having a positive impact and sending out good vibes instead of stressed out vibes all the time.
Right, exactly. Well, and I think too, like with teachers in the public classroom, like one talking about energies and things like that. You were talking earlier about how they're restricted from a lot of resources that they need, right? And they're restricted, like including people, just because of the way that administration works, right? And that has to be overwhelming for a lot of teachers, I think. And I know it was for me, to attempt to sort of deal with the classroom in like I said, in a positive manner, right? And that doesn't really help to deal with anything. It just kind of helps to manage the situation. And I don't think that helps anyone, including the children that are in your classroom, which is ironically the people that you're supposed to be helping.
Absolutely. Yeah. The resource thing is so unbelievably frustrating to me. Again, with the memes, you see like the government funded classroom versus the teacher funded
Funded
classroom. And it's
I've seen that one.
yeah. Yeah. It's like bare bones compared to like all pretty and frilly. And,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, you have to teach these first graders how to read and they need 10 books in their book bin while they're sitting there. Like, okay, well, who's going to give me those books? So I'm spending thousands of dollars to get books into my classroom library so kids can read the books. And just all the things from like, this kid keeps forgetting his folder, so I have to give him a folder every week. All the little things that people don't think of. Or we have to provide snacks because this child doesn't have food at home, so I'm going to be the one who gives them snacks. Or all the things. And it's so, you want so much to be that provider and that caregiver, but it's taxing. It's very taxing on anybody.
It is definitely a lot. And I know that when you're in a public or even a private school, or a Catholic school, sometimes it is just too much to ask of one person, right? Like I know with elementary teachers, typically you're with, you're with one class every day, right? You might have music where you see multiple different kids a day, but it is very draining, to have to be on like that all the time, and to have to, not deal with, but to have to teach those children, and connect with them, like you said, in so many more ways than just teachers, right? Teachers are not just teachers. They're expected to fill a whole lot more roles and wear a whole lot more hats, than just the role of teacher. Like you said, sometimes, students would come to school, and they'd be hungry because they wouldn't have food at home. Or they'd come to school and they'd be having like an emotional breakdown because, home life is not the greatest. Or, there were gang fights in the hallway and now they've got issues with their friends or with not their friends or whoever, right? Like you're wearing so many more hats than just being a teacher. It's not like you're standing in front of a classroom and actually teaching all day.
Exactly. And we're having to do with those little resources, the little time, especially with the bigger class numbers. We have to make decisions or sometimes assumptions about kids and what we think will work best for them. And we don't always choose the right way. We're always, teachers are always trying to choose, the next course of action with the best intention in mind, but sometimes it's not exactly what the kids need. And I've found myself doing that too, where I thought a kid, oh, maybe this kid has, they have a lot of energy, they're super wiggly, they're kind of all over the place in the classroom. I'm going to do XYZ with them. But then once I started bringing human design into my classroom and I would go and look at kids' human design charts and figure out how their energy was meant to work, I could be like, oh, you know what I thought was going on with this kid is actually the exact opposite. Like this kid is soaking up everybody else's energy and they don't know how to handle it. So now I'm going to sort of tackle how I approach this kid in the complete opposite way that I would have before. So, there's so much you have to do and problem solve in the moment to try to do the best for those kids that come with extra, maybe they're tired, maybe, they just don't know how to process their emotions, all of the things. But human design can be a really good resource to help parents and teachers sort of unpack what's going on with their kiddos.
Well, and I think the students, especially of today's world, and this brings up a very valid point of yours, people in general just need more specialized attention. Like I feel like there is an emotional lack, that's gone around and that is going around. in our society, and that is a problem. But particularly children, because they don't really know how to deal with all of that, right? They don't have their resource or their toolkit, or like that's what I call it all the time, right? Is a toolkit of resources to be able to handle things and to be able to cope with things in an effective manner, right? Things that happen or things that they're feeling or whatever it might be. And children in particular, they need so much more specialized attention, simply because of what the world has become. We have higher needs, we have higher demands from society, and I think that children these days do not have the skill set. A lot of them don't have the skill set that they need, and there's pressures too. Performing at certain jobs or being able to get into a certain college. There's a high stress on grades, because you have to be able to stand out, right? You have to be able to, and not only grades, but you have to be able to do this. You have to be able to, be great at sports or whatever. There's so much pressure to succeed as a child, right? And to excel as a child. And I don't think that that's helpful. I think that talking about that in terms of human design, that would be a very effective model, I think, for looking at how a child could best succeed in that format. If they know what their energies are like, if they know how they can get the best performance out of themselves, then I think that that's a definitely a possibility.
Exactly. And there's a couple of things that come to mind about human design, like as you're speaking. There in human design, we have different centers and they all have their different themes. And if you have the center defined, that means you have access to that energy or that theme all the time. If you have it undefined, you're kind of soaking up other people's energy there. And so for a lot of people, there's a heart center or a will center, two different names for the same center. And if people have it undefined, they're going to have this conditioned need to prove themselves all the time. And so, for those kiddos, finding a way to help them realize their value and their self-worth without needing to prove themselves all the time. We also have the root center, which is all about that pressure, that stress to get things done. And kids who have that undefined don't have that pressure that innate stress. Like I always joke that, I'm stressed out, but it's a good stress. And my husband's like, what is that? Because I have that root center defined. So that stress motivates me, but he has it undefined. So for him, if he's picking up on my root center energy, then he's going to feel this pressure to get things done, but he doesn't know how to do it. He doesn't know how to handle it. So for a kid that might be rushing through something and doing it kind of in a messy or sloppy or inaccurate way, just to be free of that pressure, or maybe they freeze and they sit there and they're looking at their paper. They can't do anything because they don't know where to start. So these things show up a lot within kids. And the biggest thing too, coming off of COVID, is that social emotional learning piece. The solar plexus is a big center that I talk about a lot, especially with kids, because if you have it defined, these kids have this emotional wave that they ride all the time. So they're constantly going on this wave of highs and lows. And sometimes it can be intense. Like my own almost 7-year-old is defined there, and he has big emotions. And for somebody like me or my younger son who are undefined there, we don't ride that emotional wave. And so picking up on other people's emotions can be really overwhelming. And then we tend to be the peacekeepers or avoid conflict. So it's really good to, like, once you learn about the centers or even some of the more minute aspects of human design, it can tell you so much about your kids, your personal kids, the kids in your classroom, and how you can approach them or support them, especially when they're feeling conditioned by the pressures of school and society.
Which I think is very important, right? For myself, I always say practice makes progress. That's my business sort of motto, if you want to call it that. Practice makes progress, not practice makes perfect. And I think that that's a bit of a mindset change. It is a mindset change. That is definitely a mindset shift. And when I ask kids, like when I first, start working with them, or one of my team first starts working with them, and that's typically part of the first sort of conversation, right? Because you want to be able to build that rapport with a child and be able to talk to them and have them feel like they can connect to you in a positive manner, right? Because if you're working with someone on academics or socio-emotional skills or life skills, you have to be able to work together, right? You can't just have one person doing all the work. The child has to want it too. So building rapport is really important. And when, um, when I will say that to a child, what's the saying? Practice makes. They automatically will always say perfect, right? That's like an ingrained societal concept. I have asked children like as young as 4 years old, what's the saying? Practice makes, and they'll say perfect. And it just I'm changing it, and we're changing it one child at a time. It's not practice makes perfect, it's practice makes progress, right? Being able to have that mindset shift of expecting perfection from yourself and telling yourself that you expect perfection from yourself, your subconscious picks up on that, right? I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a psychologist, but I do understand how the basic brain works, right? When you talk to yourself in a certain way, your brain picks up on that and your subconscious is going to pick up on that. So if you tell yourself that practice makes perfect, well, then that's what you're expecting out of yourself. And is that really fair, right? Or is anyone perfect? No. And I think that that's something that could that kind of fits in very nicely to the idea of finding finding different ways, depending on your energies and your family life and all that stuff, but finding different ways to take those societal pressures and those societal expectations off of yourself, and off of your children, because they really don't belong there in the first place.
Exactly. And as somebody who is a perfectionist myself and trying to overcome that, and I see glimpses of that in my child, I'm just like, we got to get rid of that, need for perfection. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Practice makes progress. It's great.
Practice
I'm going to
makes
start
progress.
using that. I'm going to steal it.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah.
I have found it's very helpful. And it sets a bit of a mindset too, right? That I don't expect perfection, from people either, right? Because I hold myself, I hold myself to high standards, but I don't hold other people to the same, high standards. And it's funny that oftentimes we're harder on ourselves than we are on other people. We can be so forgiving with other people, but when it comes to ourselves, we can be super hard on ourselves. So I'm kind of preaching to myself here. Practice makes progress, right? I am a perfectionist. I'm working very hard at trying not to be such a perfectionist, because it is causing problems in other areas, because I never want to be I never want to have something that's less than perfect, right? But I got to remind myself, practice makes progress, and it's okay to not put out something that is perfect all the time.
And I think too, the like focus on standardized testing and things like that, where you have this pass or you have to pass with flying colors or whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
creates that need for perfection and has created this anxiety. When you look at the mental health statistics of kids in schools these days, especially high schoolers, and some of the, traumatic things that can happen when they aren't able to receive help. That's another thing personally where human design has helped me, because I suffered from anxiety my entire life. And now that I've learned about my human design and authority in human design, which is how you are meant to make decisions, and it's always with your body, it's never with your head. And all of us, I would guarantee, are probably making decisions with our head, and our head tell us these stories that aren't necessarily true. That's what creates anxiety. So once I got out of my head and tapped into my human design authority and started making decisions from my body and what felt like the right decision, my anxiety was completely gone. And I just know that can help so many kids these days, just realizing, okay, listen to your body, make the decision that your body knows is right for you, and let your head sit in the passenger seat. Your brain doesn't need to be driving. It doesn't need to be telling you all these stories that probably are not true.
I like that one. Let your head sit in the passenger seat. I am definitely going to use that, because being a perfectionist, I'm the classic overthinker. I overthink everything all the time. I overthink everything. And I'm trying hard not to. But in terms of finding specific strategies to do that, it's more difficult than it sounds, particularly when you're used to overthinking all the time, right? You can't just change 28 years of overthinking by willpower, right? You've got to work at improving that. But practice makes progress, so I'll keep reminding myself of that. Let your head sit in the passenger seat. I think that's a really good saying, because I think that I know for a fact I'm not the only person that struggles with that. So thank you. That's quite helpful.
Yeah, and there's two more centers. There's a head center and an ajna center too, which are all about thinking and making ideas and formulating plans. And a lot of times, a lot of us feel like we always have to have an answer to things. And really, most of us are designed to not have answers. like just to kind of be inspired and create ideas and maybe use those ideas to help other people, but not necessarily act on them ourselves. And so having that permission to be like, you know what? I don't know. Here are my thoughts, but I don't have to act on these is really helpful too with the overthinking.
Mm-hmm. Right. And thinking like, okay, this is just a thought that I'm having and recognizing it as a thought, or an idea. Someone else said to me once, and I'm sure it was from some famous scientist or psychologist or whatever, brains are for having thoughts. They're not for holding them. So I have found that since a really helpful strategy for myself, I have found that since I have started writing things down and I have started like getting things out of my head, it's been very helpful in terms of like less anxiety and less always feeling like I need to like do the next thing, right? And less go. I have found that that's been very helpful. So it's just about finding specific strategies, right? That works for me. It may not work for everybody else. That's why you've got to kind of do some self-reflection and get yourself some help if you need it, because there's no shame in reaching out for help. I always tell my students that, you know, I'm the first person to say that if I don't know an answer, I will tell you that I don't know the answer. Just yesterday I had a student ask me something that I feel like I should have known the answer to, but I was honest and I said, you know what, I don't know the answer. How could we go and find the answer together, right? Because it's not necessarily about knowing everything, it's just knowing where to go to find the answers or to find the help that you're looking for.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you so much, Bronwyn. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. I appreciate all of your insights, and it's been a great conversation. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And if anybody wants to reach out, you can find me on Instagram is the easiest, guided by human design, or just Google my website is there too. And I have parenting unpacks and just created this new little session called Little Humans and Their Design, where it's half of me talking to the parent about the child's design and half me explaining to the kid in kid-friendly terms about their design and how they can be successful. And it's just one of my passions to help parents, to help kids. And, you know, if it speaks to you, if it calls to you, I'm here and ready to help.
Absolutely. For those listeners who are interested in learning more about what Bronwyn does and the services that she offers and packages and things that she has going on, I have the blog that is up on my website with all of these show notes in there. So you can find all those links. That's www.starstudents.co, not .com, .co. And it'll be all up in there for you. And you can check her out. Bronwyn's a great resource.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. That is all for this week's episode of The Parent Solution. If you have any comments or questions, either about this issue or others that have come up for you, you can always find me on social media. It's Star Students on Facebook and LinkedIn, or starstudents.learning on Instagram. You can also reach out through email, which is all over social media channels. Thank you, as always, so much for listening, and I'll be back next week.